The Nintendo Switch sequel better have backwards compatibility. And you can't look yourself in the mirror and call yourself real actors until you have dumb, rad, and silly scenes. You know how long it took me to come up with that? At least 10 minutes. There's an offensive mode, switching to attack mode, and it's almost a given, isn't it? All of Nintendo's handheld, and that's the key word, handheld consoles were all backwards compatible. I mean, every last one of them. From the Game Boy Color being backwards compatible with the Game Boy, the Game Boy Advance and Advance SP consoles being backwards compatible with the Game Boy Color and Game Boy games. The game, of course, we all know the Nintendo DS was backwards compatible with Game Boy Advance games, and of course, the 3DS is backwards compatible with the DS games. So every single Nintendo handheld console was backwards compatible. As a matter of fact, I believe, and I could be wrong in this, I think Nintendo started the whole backwards compatibility thing. They were the first ones. They were the first one to introduce it, and they were the ones that kicked that going forward. They were the first. You're the first company to have a console have backwards compatibility. I'm talking about the Game Boy Color. The Game Boy Color was the first video game console to have backwards compatibility. So they're the ones that started the whole backwards compatibility thing with their handheld consoles, and they never had a handheld console that wasn't backwards compatible. Now, I thought for sure the SNES was backwards compatible with the NES, but I was wrong. So I'm glad I looked it up before I made myself look like a jackass over here. But the SNES was in fact not backwards compatible with the NES. They started that with the Game Boy Color. Now, of course, the 64 and the GameCube, obviously, once cartridges, once small-ass CDs, obviously, they weren't going to be backwards compatible. The first Nintendo console, home console, to be backwards compatible was the Wii to the GameCube. Because the funny thing was, even though the Wii actually used normal-sized CDs like a normal freaking company, as well as the small CDs, the funny thing was that the GameCube and the Wii is basically the same console. Like literally, I think the Wii is just slightly more advanced than the GameCube, but the GameCube and the Wii is the same exact console except different controllers. One's motion controls added, and that's about it. Like that's the only differential from the GameCube and the Wii. Same exact console. The GameCube was the strongest console of its generation, sold at least. So Nintendo said, screw this freaking the power race or whatever, and we end up losing anyway. We lost twice in a row, the PlayStation having the stronger console. So he said, screw that. We're not even gonna fucking make a powerful console. We're just gonna add a gimmick that we think is fun. And boy, were they right with that. The Wii sold like gangbusters. The Wii was the first backwards compatible one. They followed that up with the Wii U that was backwards compatible with the Wii. And of course the Switch wasn't backwards compatible with the Wii U, because why in God's name would you want anything to be backwards compatible or have any kind of relation to the Wii U with the smallest fucking library of games you've ever seen in a fucking console? No third-party support, complete track. The Switch not being backwards compatible with the Wii U, nobody besides the two people that bought the Wii U are going to be upset. That's a joke, but they sold 13 million copies. I say all that to say this. Their backwards compatibility lineup with their handheld consoles is spotless. Every single handheld console, besides the original Game Boy, of course, is the first handheld console, and the first hybrid console with the Switch is backwards compatible. With the other two that are not backwards compatible, obviously making sense of their first in their original lineup. Then with the home consoles, once they started doing backwards compatibility with the first time with the Wii, they never stopped until again they reached the Switch, their first hybrid console. And of course, the Wii U was CD, and the Wii was CD, and the Switch isn't CD. It's cartridges like the 3DS and the DS. So no backwards compatibility there. So their backwards compatibility, consoles being backwards compatible, a lineup is actually pretty spotless when it comes to the handheld console, and consistent with the home consoles up until the Switch, which is the first hybrid console. So there's no reason, no excuse why the Switch 2 shouldn't be backwards compatible with the Switch. It's not like they're doing a completely different gimmick like they did with the Wii. It's not like they're switching from cartridges back to CDs again. And it's not like they're not going to have the same exact kind of cartridges on the Switch 2. The Switch 2 is basically like, it's going to be an enhanced Switch, pretty much. Like what the PS5 Pro is to the PS5, Nintendo was supposedly originally supposed to release the Switch, Pro, as it was like code named, Not code name, but named by us. Just like we're naming the Switch 2 when it's not gonna be called that. But the Switch Pro was originally supposed to come out, and it's something. I think that's when COVID happened or something. I think it was around COVID. You know, when the consoles were having a hard time. I think there's the Sony, Microsoft, and Apple, and all these Android phone companies are all using the same like chipset, and so that there's a shortage of chipsets, and they kept opening more factories to make more chipsets, and there's a shortage, and that's why the PS5 and the Xbox Series X was in such short supply, and all this crap, and that's the reason why the console coming out as fast. And because the Nintendo realized, hey, if we go out and put out the Switch Pro, and we already have all these companies, including Sony and Microsoft, are technically our competition, as well as this phone companies, all fighting for the same chipset. If we go ahead and release the Switch Pro, we're gonna throw our hats into the battle of fighting for these stupid chipsets and whatnot. And then our Switch Pro probably is not going to sell that well because we're going to be battling with these stupid chipsets. Or we could just have an OLED version of our original Switch with the parts is not hard to get and we're not battling for other people, and just release that shit, and then that will help sell the Switch some more. And again, another genius business decision. You can't fault them for that. I don't blame them for doing that either. So for all we know, this Switch Pro that's supposed to come out a few years ago is basically the Switch 2. Now, I'm not saying it's the same exact Switch Pro that was supposed to come out 3 years ago. They probably, of course, like re-enhanced it and made it more stronger and all that stuff since then. But basically, this Switch Pro is basically going to be the Switch 2, where they probably upgraded it a little bit throughout the years to just upgraded it a bit and all that stuff. But this Switch, there's no reason why this Switch is not going to be backwards compatible. I think this Switch 2 / Switch Pro, whatever it's supposed to be, this console was always going to be backwards compatible. Now, there are rumors that it's not going to be backwards compatible, and if this console ends up not being backwards compatible, I'll be shocked and annoyed and bitching. Because right now, Sony's pissing everybody off with the PS5 Pro and its stupid ass pricing. And one of the leaks that I do believe from the Switch, the supposed Switch 2, is that it's definitely going to be $400. That I believe. That's more of a reason why I still believe that this Switch 2 is what the Switch Pro was going to be. And if the Switch Pro actually did come out, we wouldn't be getting a Switch 2 right now. We'd be waiting until like 2026 for the Switch 2. And whatever the Switch 2 was going to be, they're not using that dev kit or whatever to make the Switch 3 with. Now, I'm just speculating. I don't have no fucking proof of any of this shit. But I do believe that whatever the Switch Pro was supposed to be, this Switch 2 ended up becoming. I'm not saying that the Switch Pro was just sitting there completed and they just left it in the shelf for 3 years and then pulled it out and say, hey, it's a Switch 2 now. I do believe they enhanced it some more since then and all that stuff. But I'm saying Switch Pro was definitely obviously going to be able to play normal Switch games on. And I do believe the Switch 2 is going to have that. The only way I can see this Switch 2 not being backwards compatible if it's that whole dual screen thing is true. Now, if the whole thing about it being dual screen ends up being true and it's not just a variation of the Switch 2, but the actual version of the Switch 2, then that's the only way I can see it not being backwards compatible. But even then, even if the Switch 2 is dual screens handheld, it's not going to be dual screen on the TV, obviously. If you play the Switch 2 on the console, if you play the Switch 2 on the TV, it's obviously going to just be one screen. Unless they're dumb enough to actually make the Switch 2, if it's a dual screen thing, to make it play on your TV dual screen as well. That would be stupid. That would be retarded. I don't think Nintendo's that dumb. I don't think so. If the Switch 2 is dual screen, you play it on your TV, it's gonna be one screen. They're not gonna make a line in between your TV and make it. That would be retarded. That would be a dumb decision. But the Switch 2 has to be backwards compatible. It needs to be. It has to. Not only does it has to be, it needs to be. Because you want to undercut what Sony's doing with the Pro and their stupid pricing. Make the console $400 as like what's being rumored. And make the Switch 2 backwards compatible. Now, I'm not saying that just because, the PS5 Pro, obviously the PS5 Pro is going to play PS5 games. What I'm saying is, the pricing, you don't want anybody to have anything negative to say about the Switch 2. When the Switch came out, nobody had nothing negative to say. Everybody was hyped up for it. You don't want any kind of negativity coming out of the Switch 2 announcement. Whether it's in October, November, December, I think it's going to be in October. But you know, the Switch 2, you know that reveal is coming soon. If you want to undercut the fuck out of the Sony and the PS5 Pro, and the fact that everybody's pissed off at Sony right now and the PS5 Pro and its stupid pricing, you don't want anyone having anything negative to say about the Switch 2 as well. Now, obviously, if the Switch 2 is already going to come out and it's not backwards compatible, there's nothing you can do about it right now. What I'm saying is, there's no reason why you guys shouldn't have made it backwards compatible from the begin with. The hardware cannot be that so much different than the original Switch that you can't make it backwards compatible. This isn't a thing where you're trying out a new gimmick, or you're going from CDs to cartridges, or cartridges to CDs, like you did from the 64 to the GameCube and the small, and even with the small and big CDs from the Wii and the GameCube, the Wii was still backwards compatible with the GameCube. I was able to play the small GameCube CDs and the normal size CDs. So there's no reason why this shouldn't be backwards compatible. You're not doing a new gimmick. Even when you did a new gimmick with the GameCube and the Wii, you're still able to be backwards compatible. You're not switching from CDs to cartridges or cartridges to CDs. There's not the 64 to the GameCube, and this is not the Wii U to the Switch. This is cartridges to more cartridges. And if the 3DS was able to play DS games, the Switch 2 should be able to play Switch games. If you end up coming out with this reveal and it's not backwards compatible, you're gonna have just as much negativity on you the same way that Sony does with the PS5 Pro. You wanna undercut the fuck out of them by having a good pricing at $400 compared to their $700, a $300 difference. And you wanna be able to say that it's backwards compatible, because if it's not backwards compatible, now people are gonna have something negative to say about your console and its reveal, and people are gonna be bitching about it. They're gonna have something to bitch about, just like people have something to bitch about with the PS5 Pro and its pricing. But if it is backwards compatible, no one's gonna say anything. People are gonna be happy the Switch 2 is coming, that they can play their Switch games on it, the original Switch games on the sequel console, and that it's priced fairly, unlike the PS5 Pro. You don't want to having any negative things to say. So even if it's $500, as long as it's not past $500, like if it's a really powerful console, more powerful than a Steam Deck, then even if it's $500, it won't be that big a deal. But if there's a good way to undercut Sony, the PS5 Pro comes out in November, and then your reveal of your Switch console is backwards compatible and is like more powerful and is priced well, then people are not going to be buying the PS5 Pro. Most people are going to be waiting for that Switch 2. People are not going to buy the Pro anyway, but I'm just saying. This is Attack Monsters, back to the fence, and I'm out. Peace.